Welcome to the Heartland Journal's Tennessee podcast with your host, Steve Abramowitz, editor-in-chief of heartlandjournal.com.
Howdy, y'all. Welcome back to the show. I am Steve Abramowitz, and this is the Heartland Journal podcast. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and pass it around. We only grow with your help, and thanks for doing it. On this show, we're focusing on our nation today with always an interesting person making a positive change in our community, where I interview people who are making an impact and are lovers of truth. Today, we are talking with special guest Douglas Deaton. Doug is a retired from law enforcement gentleman, but still very active with his RDR investigations and crisis management business. He received 79 commendations and awards during his career, including a life-saving award in 2012 and being named the Plano Police Department's Sworn Supervisor of the Year in 2014. Lieutenant Deaton completed his police service with a 5-year assignment in persons crimes, where he successfully managed some of the most significant and sensitive criminal investigations in the history of Plano, Texas. With decades of real-world experience in criminal and administrative investigations, uniform patrol, SWAT team operations, police supervision, and law enforcement training in several areas of expertise, including fact-finding, police procedures, research and analysis, high-risk warrant service, use of force, and the selection and training of law enforcement personnel. His clients are attorneys, businesses, high net worth individuals, local government agencies, and public figures. Now, mostly working as a litigation consultant for attorneys, Doug is currently retained as an expert on numerous high-profile cases involving citizen self-defense shootings and police use of force, and testifying about the Epic City and Muslim integration and non-integration or enforcement of civil rights laws in Texas. Joining us now. Hang on. First, always, thank you for your service. Hello, and how are you today?
I'm doing great, Steve. It's really nice to be here. I appreciate the invitation.
Oh my gosh. Well, I know we had to schedule for today, so thank you for zipping all the way around the world to be on time for this call. I really appreciate it. Where were you?
Well, I started out in Venice and just kind of worked my way around the Adriatic. And as of yesterday morning, I was in Croatia. So, yeah, I went to visit Slovenia and then further south in Croatia, a couple places there, and then flew out of Croatia yesterday, and about 24 hours later, landed at DFW International here in Dallas, Texas.
And here you are with me. Did you visit the hot springs of kings like Alexander the Great? That's on my bucket list.
No, not those, not those. Well, let me tell you, we visited quite a few other places. Kings and royalty, and generals and leaders and religious figures and cultural figures, cultural icons, castles, and everything else you can imagine. And of course, at the end, we wrapped it up at Dubrovnik, which is, at least nowadays, is somewhat famous for the whole connection to the Game of Thrones series. Lots of filming locations there. So
that, and there's a fascinating bridge that has been there for a long, long time, which connected basically East and West, the Ottoman Empire to the Christian West. And
yes.
It has gone back and forth, almost like Alsace-Lorraine in France and Germany. Did you see that?
Didn't get to go see that particular bridge. However,
amazing.
We did visit quite a few locations where things were very touch and go for over, a couple hundred years. The places where the Ottoman Turks attacked repeatedly, where people had to, to withdraw and hide out and do their best. And there were some just incredible historical things that happened there, which, I didn't really expect to see this, but many of those things have some very interesting parallels to what we're seeing today.
Exactly right. Exactly right. So let's get into it. So being from Texas, the Alamo. Most people
Absolutely.
don't remember a similar fight, the Battle of Tours, October 732, victory won by Charles Martel, the de facto ruler of the Frankish kingdoms over Muslim invaders from Spain.
Yes.
The Franks defeated the Islamic army and stopped the northward advance of Islam. So fast forward to 1836, 1,100 years later, 1,500 Mexicans marched into San Antonio as the first step in the campaign to retake Texas and the siege at the Alamo. Do you fear Muslims are getting ready to replay history of tours in the Alamo and do violence in your hometown of El Paso?
I don't know if that would necessarily happen in my lifetime, but what I do fear, Steve, with all sincerity, and I'll come back to this other side point for a moment. I do want to be clear with the audience. I'm not an activist or on this issue. I am a, sort of a, I won't call myself a historian. I'm perhaps an amateur student of history, but I'm certainly not ignorant of history, and the long path of history and its significance. So I may not necessarily be afraid that's going to happen in my lifetime, but I will tell you and the audience, Steve, I am deeply concerned that my grandchildren who don't exist yet, or my great grandchildren, may have to make some very, very serious choices at some point during their lifetimes. And I think it's funny that you bring up the Battle of Tours and Charles Martel, because oftentimes, in our modern education system, the Christian Crusades are painted as something that was evil or wrong, that it was, some kind of violent form of, colonialism, if whatever. Very few people truly understand that it was a response to well over 400 years of significant and very serious Muslim aggression. And you can only run so far before you have to stop and speak the truth and make a stand and decide this is as far as we're going and we're not running any further. Turning the cheek isn't working. Turning the other cheek isn't working, and it's not going to work. And people like Charles Martel understood that. At some point, you have to stop and turn around and face the truth and, frankly, face the enemy, the person who self-identifies as your enemy. And that's exactly what happened there. It's funny, there are some parallels to Texas history in that regard. So while we may have lost the Battle of the Alamo, but not too long after that, at the Battle of San Jacinto, that's where Texans finally stopped, turned around, and made a stand and fought against what at that time was the most superior army in the Western Hemisphere. And so that battle took 18 minutes, but it literally changed the world.
And there's a reason why we say remember the Alamo, not remember San Jacinto, because it was the warning that if you don't push back, you're going to get pushed over. Okay, that we jumped a little bit ahead in the spoiler alert segment, but let's talk a little bit more about you. So you began in law enforcement in Highland Park, Texas, as a full-time police officer and firefighter, which is kind of a big deal because in my hometown, there was an annual police versus fire football game. There still is actually.
Yeah.
How do you had time? How did you have time for both? And did they give loyalty hazing playing for the other team to you?
Well, that's that kind of department that I worked for at that time. It was a good place to start. Those are typically much smaller agencies, and they sometimes refer to those as a public safety agency. So they do all things. And usually you see those in communities where they don't necessarily have the resources or the abilities to have a full-time police department, fire department, and sometimes a separate EMS or paramedic. And so that's what that was. So it was called a public safety agency. Again, it's a good it's a good model for a place that doesn't require a great deal of specialty, and which frankly is typically has a lower tempo, a slower tempo. It was, again, a great place to start. Got some wonderful training there. When I did start there was quite a few older guys that had come from full-time police departments and full-time fire departments. And they, the older guys, at least I thought they were older guys in their 40s, asking me like, hey, what are you doing starting here? Because typically most people come here to retire, not to start their career. And that actually ended up being pretty good advice. So I worked there for about 2.5 years, and then I decided to go full-time on the police side of things. And
You next joined the Plano Police Department and spent the next 23 years working in high-profile units with performance standards among the most demanding in Texas law enforcement. What was the big difference between Highland Park and Plano police work, and what you're seeing now Would it ever have happened in Highland Park, or is that kind of like a don't try that in a small town and Plano's a big city? What's going on?
Yeah, that just I mean Highland Park is one of the wealthiest places in America, and that's not an exaggeration. It's sort of considered the bubble. They use that term sometimes in the Dallas area. Highland Park and University Park are often referred to as the bubble. It is shockingly wealthy. It's been there since the early 1900s. Again, some of the most powerful and wealthiest people in the world live there. And so, again, great training and a great place to start. But the biggest difference between there and Plano just immediately was the sheer size. Plano is in the North Dallas area. It's about 72 square miles with roughly 300,000 people. The police beats alone, just that you're just the smallest geographic area of responsibility in Plano is larger than the entire town of Highland Park. So the training that I got at Plano was pretty intense. They have extremely high performance standards there, very high, high standards for just initial hiring and training, and expectations for performance were very high. And so it was a great place for me to go, and it was a great, especially a great place for a young guy like me to go to. The other big difference is that Plano is big enough that it has full-time specializations there. For example, bomb team, K9, SWAT, criminal investigations, and then within criminal investigations itself, that's broken down into things such as property crimes or crimes against persons, financial crimes, sex crimes, etc. Those are all full-time specialties. So it's again a large enough place with a big enough budget and large enough organization that you can do pretty much whatever you'd like to do within the law enforcement sphere, as long as you meet those standards and you work hard and prove yourself to be.
We might see a CSI
capable.
Plano one day, but we'll never see a CSI Highland Park unless there
No,
was a crime committed in
no.
Highland Park. Okay, so in your bio, I mentioned you managed some of the most significant criminal investigations in Plano police history. Can you
Right.
tell us which one stuck with you the most?
Well, there were several of those. I mean, one that really does jump out to me still was, and your viewers can just can do an internet search for this, but the sorority rapist in Plano, Texas. There was a series of sexual assaults or rapes in the North Texas area, not just the city of Plano, but in the general Dallas Fort Worth area. They were all committed against older black females who all belonged to the same college sorority. And the all we knew was that the perpetrator was an unknown black male. And there was a significant number of those sexual assaults that occurred, and it was a true mystery. There was multiple agencies working on it, but eventually it was deemed to be unsolvable, turned into a cold case, which was frankly largely forgotten. And once I eventually became a lieutenant in crimes against persons, I recognized that our cold case work and our cold case standards were probably not where they needed to be. And I worked with some guys there, some great detectives, and we reopened that case, looked at some different methodologies, different things, and with the use of some DNA and some incredible police work by some unbelievably skillful detectives, and also some genealogy, we were able to eventually track down the perpetrator.
Oh, wow.
And so,
That's
and he
amazing.
was eventually arrested, and he's been charged and or been tried, convicted, and sent to prison.
Thank God for life.
I believe it was. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure it
Okay.
was life. So,
Wow.
and again, quite a few victims out there.
Well, God bless you for doing that. All right. So your website says you are especially skilled at revealing the differences between genuine investigations and shallow inquiries conducted to create the illusion of diligence. Why would
Yes.
anyone need to create the illusion of diligence?
Well, that is something that local governments are also especially skilled at, is creating the illusion of diligence. That is something that I learned along the way during my police career, especially after I went to grad school and learned how local governments actually work. Again, especially after working in the office of the chief of police and liaising with my counterparts in other government agencies and government offices and departments, many times it's all about creating a public image. And the way I would describe it to your listeners and to anybody who really wants to truly understand how governments work, and I'm talking again, not just about local, but state governments and even the federal government to a certain extent. But just imagine that you're interested in purchasing a home. You found a home that you think is probably a solid candidate. It has beautiful curb appeal. You drive up, the front of the home is just beautiful. It is immaculate. You walk in with the realtor, the real estate agent, and the front of the house is great. It's everything you want. Again, the entry is beautiful. The first couple of rooms are great. But as you move deeper into the home, you begin to realize, hey, looks like there's some things that are not finished here. And where's the back door? There is not a back. What happened here? And you see there's a massive wall, there's a giant hole in the wall. Looks like someone drove a truck through the back door. Then you find out, hey, none of the toilets are working correctly in this house. In fact, there are no toilets back here. There's not a toilet at all back here in the master bedroom. And it appears that somebody's been using the master bedroom as an illegal dumping ground. What is going on here? Nobody in their right mind would consider purchasing a home like that.
In Hollywood, we would call that a facade or a Potemkin village, a fake front
Absolutely.
with nothing behind the doors. Yeah,
that's correct. But let me tell you this: the visuals on the internet, on the various home selling sites, are going to be just chef's kiss beautiful. They're going to look great. The realtor is going to tell you how wonderful it is and how great the people were that lived there before you, and why it's a wonderful place for you to move into and live in. And obviously, I'm painting a little bit of a silly picture there, but that actually is, in many cases, the truth about how local governments work. Public appeal, curb appeal, public perception, and public image in many, many local governments always trumps reality or facts, and in some cases, legal obligations and the law itself. I have personally seen numerous local governments, large ones. And by local governments, what I mean are cities, municipalities, townships, counties. I've personally seen where if they determine that there has been significant criminal activity committed by a member or an employee of their own agency, especially if that person is a middle to high ranking department head, that they almost never prosecute. And in fact, they almost never conduct a serious investigation. But if they do, it is a quiet internal investigation, typically carried out by an external third party, and then it's all made to just go away. And they typically offer that person a gracious exit, and then they just sort of smooth it all over, try to put some new drywall up in the hole in the back of the back wall, and then just try to proceed from there without any public fanfare or admission of guilt.
Yeah, anybody can see the movie
all the
J.
time.
Edgar with Leonardo DiCaprio. I think Clint Eastwood directed it. You can see for yourself. Even the FBI likes to get in front of the cameras for somebody else's police work. So do you fill that void? Is that what you're advertising? Is that you're the guy that
I do a lot of that nowadays. So I will just be very candid. Attorneys pay me quite a bit of money to show them where the gaps are. One of my specialties is attorneys will share with me all of the information that they have obtained from a local government, for example. And they'll say, hey, we're not getting anywhere with this, but this is all they have. And my specialty is looking at it and showing them what is not there. I show them where the gaps are. But again, it's that whole, if any of your listeners are aware of the whole Dunning-Kruger thing, you can't really be, you almost have to be a true expert to be able to point out how someone else is not an expert. And so it's often not what is there, it's what's not there. But if you don't regularly work in government, then you are not accustomed to the many different ways in which information can be hidden. There can be not necessarily destroyed, but there's layers, or they can rename it. They can call it different things. They can transfer files from one place to another. In one case in particular that I worked on involving a major North Texas city, I pointed out that some of the language in their subpoenas allowed for the city to slip through and still tell the truth. So they're not being deceptive, or excuse me, they are being deceptive, but they're not necessarily lying. And what I figured out was, oh, the files you're asking for, no, they're telling the truth. Those files are not in their possession because they transferred those files to a separate law firm, and those files are now in the possession of a law firm. So you need to recraft your subpoena to state that you're looking for files specific to items A, B, and C, which may be retained by other parties to include, and put a list of those type of parties. That one went all the way to the AG's office.
Good old weasel words. I think we just saw this
Oh, yes.
with FBI Director Comey, who had a secret room and could easily say, "I don't have them. I don't have them. I don't have them," because they're over there. Okay.
That's exactly what they do. Yes. And I
So
do have some real world experience dealing with the FBI and exactly that kind of thing.
yeah, it's probably the premier agency for it. I mean, maybe even invented it. At SMU, you got your degree. Go Peruna. And UT Dallas, go TMOC. You got your Master's of Public Affairs degree. UT Dallas, 30,000 students. They have a 14-year-old who's going there, so that's neat. But
Oh,
I also read when I was doing this research, 30% are Arab students. Any
yes.
idea what your alma mater is offering that is so attractive to Middle Easterners?
Well, I can't say for sure, but the University of Texas at Dallas was originally started from seed money that was given to local governments by Texas Instruments. And the reason they did that, that was back in the 1950s or 60s. The reason they did that was because there was a serious lack of electrical engineers, other engineers that were really needed at Texas Instruments and other firms in the Dallas area. So it was an attempt to grow a larger group of engineers to work on future projects, many of those in the defense space. But since then, UT Dallas has become sort of a hub for engineering of different types, but it also has one of the better local government management tracks there. So that's kind of what I did. So I got a Master of Public Affairs there with a specialty in local government management and then also emergency management / Homeland Security. But you are correct. There are a very large number of Muslim students there. I believe the Muslim Student Association there at UT Dallas is very strong, very robust. And I know for a fact that some of their key members were also on terrorist watch lists. Again, that's not me making an accusation. This is public information that's available out there in the local, on the
If they're
internet.
on the list, you can't make it up.
Yeah,
It's a
it's on the
list.
list. Yeah.
So the
And
Dallas-Fort Worth
that's right. It's a hub for that.
and the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, which includes Plano, is known to have a significant Muslim population. The Muslim population in Dallas, Texas is estimated to be around 30,000, with 15 Islamic centers and mosques. Specifically, the Metroplex has numerous mosques and is even referred to by some as the Medina of America. What has made Dallas so attractive?
Well, again, Dallas it's large as it is. The DFW area is roughly 7 million people. It is a massive city here, but there's a great deal of space. It's a relatively flat area. It's not landlocked by any stretch of the imagination. There's some great economic viability and opportunities here. And that is why, for example, many large corporations have relocated here. It's a very pro-business, low tax, growth-minded, growth-oriented area. So if you can't get a job in the DFW area, you just can't get one. But housing cost is relatively low, especially when compared to places like California or New York, and the greater Chicagoland area. And so it's an attractive place for everyone, people from around the world. So I'm not exaggerating when I say that during my time at the Plano PD, I mean, it was like the crossroads of the world. I worked with, and around citizens from just about every conceivable nation that you can imagine. I mean, dozens of different foreign languages being spoken in the home. So to me, there's nothing surprising about that. The only thing that I'm a little surprised at, to be honest, Steve, is that and I don't have any information to counter it. I'm just telling you from my personal perception is I'm surprised that stated number of Muslim residents in Texas or in the DFW area is that low. Frankly, I suspect it's much higher than that.
Hmm. Could be. And now March 23rd is Pakistan Day, the resolution introduced by State Representative Dr. Solomon Lalani acknowledges the significant contributions of Pakistani Texans in the state's social, religious, linguistic, and economic spheres. I never knew Pakistan was so significant to Texas. What did Dr. Lalani want that for?
I don't know, to be honest, Steve. I think that's a lot of virtue signaling, to be honest. Which is something that's always present in local government, always has been to a certain extent, no matter what someone's politics are. But I have noticed a significant uptick and frankly, I'm going to be just very candid here. These are my opinions. I no longer work for the police department. They can no longer control what I say or my expression of thought. But in my personal opinion, that I've seen a significant uptick in what I believe to be leftist and liberal virtue signaling by local and state elected officials who are all just, they're climbing all over themselves, trying to prove how tolerant they are, how enlightened they are, and how non-racist they are. And so that it doesn't surprise me to see something like that. It's not necessarily meaningful though in any kind of serious way.
Okay. So I follow on X at Amy Meck, Amymek, and her
Mhm.
RAIR, Rare Foundation USA News. That is a grassroots activist and investigative organization
Yes.
comprised of everyday Americans leading a movement to reclaim our republic from the network of individuals and organizations waging war on Americans, our Constitution, our borders, and our Judeo-Christian values. What do you think of Amy and what's she doing by creating awareness? My column tomorrow is actually about her, but what do you think?
Well, I think that Amy is doing some great work out there. There's no doubt that Amy is a bit polarizing, but one of the things that separates her, at least in my opinion, separates her from some of the other more polarizing figures on the right, if we want to say she's on the right, is that as polarizing as some of her pieces are, when you begin to parse the language in them and you begin to check her facts and her sources, it's unquestionable. Her writing style it does tend to make some Muslims, especially the radical Muslims, pretty angry. Her writing style also tends to make those virtue signalers that I mentioned also very uncomfortable and somewhat angry. But again, I would say go to the facts. I place a premium on facts, on evidence and corroborated information, which would lead any reasonable person to believe that something out of the ordinary is occurring. And I think that Amy does a very good job of that. So, however uncomfortable some of her writing might make some people, I would urge any of her critics, again, to simply start fact checking her and ask the question, is she wrong? Where is she wrong?
They never do that on the
Show it to
left.
me.
They
And they
never
never
do
and
that
they never do that.
not on the left. No, that they can't because they know that they don't have the facts on the sides. They only have emotion. And so
That's right.
I'm hoping she sees the show and likes it and comes on because I've tried. The other two I mentioned in my column have been on, so that's not
Hmm.
biased. It's just good, like you said, like I say, lovers of truth. All right, let's get to it. Epic City, the controversial Islamic faith-friendly, quote unquote, development planned outside Dallas is not a dream. It is the next phase of a real, already functioning Sharia-based parallel society inside Texas. Is Sharia compatible with the US Constitution or the Texas one?
The short answer to that question is no, it is not. There are obviously some apologists and some people on the left who will tell you that Sharia law, that the reality of Sharia law is that it's no different than the type of religious law that many practicing Jews observe, or that in fact even some fundamental Christians observe. But that's simply not the case. And the reason why it's different is we have to understand that there is no actual separation of church and state when it comes to the kind of Islam that practices Sharia law. While there may be many secular Muslims living in the U.S., the ones who are actually practicing Sharia law, that they do not see that there is any kind of separation between church and state, that Sharia and Islam is itself one giant system of both religion and politics and statecraft combined into one. And that's really the crux of this issue, that many liberal Americans and otherwise well-meaning Americans simply do not understand.
That's right. You gave bombshell public testimony at a Collin County hearing. Did anything come of it afterwards by the county or mayor? And what did you tell them that day?
Well, just to be fair and to be very, very transparent, I never intended to speak at that meeting. I went to that meeting with the intent to simply watch and observe, maybe take some notes. A tremendous number of people had signed up to speak that same day. But about halfway through those public speakers, I began to realize that there was a serious gap in the understanding of both the speakers and some of the members of the county commissioners court. In Texas, a commissioner's court is similar to like a county version of a city council. Even though we call it a court, it's really just a governing body. And so I knew that I had 3 minutes. It was a 3-minute time limit. And so I just quickly, just off the top of my head, hammered out some talking points right there on my smartphone, just kind of double thumbed it, hammered it out real quickly, tried to pare it down. I got up, said what I said, and then things changed for me very significantly after that. My phone began ringing off the hook, so to speak. Emails were just overwhelming. I did get a lot of back channel support from some local elected officials and a tremendous outpouring of support from local law enforcement guys, both at the at the city, county, and state level. And I'm talking about working cops, line officers, first line supervisors. I did get some feedback from my former back channel feedback from my former employer. My understanding, as it was explained to me, is that some people at the city of Plano were not happy with me at all, and that at least one person in the chief's office over at Plano also was not happy with me either, especially with regard to my comments about the location of the bomb trucks and SWAT vehicles. But again, that was already public knowledge anyway, and we can talk about that too if you'd like to.
Yeah, I would, but let's get to this. So, autonomous exclusionary zone, that gives me PTSD personally, because when I was in Seattle during the summer of Love 2.0,
Yeah.
they took over 6 blocks and called it Chop Chaz, which was an autonomous zone.
Yes.
The exclusionary part was implied if you didn't want to get shot. In Sweden, they call it no-go zones, where the Muslim youth are out of control. Women aren't safe, and the rape capital of Europe is now Sweden, unfortunately. What did Texas and U.S. Marshals, not what, why did Texas and U.S. Marshals allow this AEZ?
Well, the thing is that again, my opinion and my observation is that one of the problems with many government entities, local government entities in the North Texas area, is that they never ever acknowledge or see any hint of malicious behavior or malicious intent by anyone, especially if that organization is a minority organization or especially if it's an Islamic organization. Again, that's something that I've seen many, many times up close. I've been in the room when these discussions were had. So it's just that the notion that there might actually be an Islamic organization in the city of Plano with malicious intent that is working towards long-term goals, that is something that it just simply does not compute for many of these decision makers, even though you can tell that deep down inside they know it's true. But they don't want to have to be the ones to deal with it because they're worried about being called bigots or racist or Islamophobic. And also, quite frankly, another issue that you see a great deal in police department leadership and local government leadership is that they know that all they have to do is make it to retirement. They can kick the can down the road and it will be someone else's problem in the future. They don't like to see themselves as being a key part of or having any place in what some people might refer to as a culture war. Now, also, I want to be clear, too, that while this has been going on in East Plano for quite some time, 12 to 13 years, the plan to build a 400-something acre Muslim community just a little bit east of Dallas has not yet come to fruition. They have not yet broken ground. And in fact, they have not even applied for permits. And so this is something that was stopped in its tracks, but it was certainly planned. It's still planned. They're still trying to make it happen. But there was no actual 400-acre autonomous zone that was actually built, although it is abundantly clear that's exactly what the plan was.
Right.
And I
Epic
will
City would be Muslim only. But
absolutely.
isn't that a constitutional civil rights violation and discriminatory? And did any taxpayer funds get earmarked to go towards building it? I mean, the sewer system, the electric, anything. Taxes go to
Yeah.
police and fire because you did that. So schools and sewers, do they plan to use city services?
Well, that was the big question, is exactly where was all this money going to come from? Because, a lot of it can, of course, can come from private dollars. But at the end of the day, infrastructure, like you mentioned, sewer, streets, roads, electrical, in order to run, traffic control and all that. That ultimately is always comes down to public money and, local governments.
Yeah, just to be able to call 911, and
That's right.
that's what we pay taxes for.
That's correct. And the thing is, this plan was, it was going to be right outside of a very, very small city, just outside the city limits. So it would not technically be in the city. It would have been in a unincorporated area
Unincorporated, yeah.
of the county. But make no mistake, that being so close to the city limits, it would have given had that happened, and if it does happen sometime in the future, thousands of people move into this area, they would then outnumber the people living in that small town right next door and would immediately give them de facto control over the whole thing.
Now, this is
So
happening all over the country, actually, because EPIC, EPIC, stands for East Plano Islamic Center, which was a mosque, or maybe it is a mosque, and
it
it
is
wanted
a
to
mosque.
transform into a self-governing ideological zone. 74 homes near the EPIC Mosque in Plano were sold exclusively to Muslims. Realtors have laws against discrimination and red
Yes.
lines, all that Eric Holder Civil Rights Division of disparate impact, the DOJ we
Mhm.
lived through in the 90s. Have the realtors been slapped with fines or losing licenses for discriminating who they sell to?
I don't even know that any realtors were ever involved in the sale of any of those homes, Steve, because all of that was being done through a couple of different legal entities, something that I did look into. And so, for example, there's 74 homes currently surrounding the mosque in East Plano. That's the ones that are on the property that's actually owned by some of the legal entities which are associated with the East Plano Islamic Center. What's also not included here, though, what hasn't really been discussed, is all of the hundreds and hundreds of other homes that are in private neighborhoods immediately surrounding that mosque, which are owned by members of that mosque. They're owned by people with Arabic surnames, and many people who attend that mosque. Those homes actually surround all of that, taken as a whole. It literally surrounds all of the property on which the Plano Police Academy is located. But as far as those homes inside or on that property that is owned by entities associated with the East Plano Islamic Center, many of those homes were financed through the UIF Corporation, which is a Sharia. It is right there on their own website. That is a private corporation based in Michigan. It's just about 15 minutes from Dearborn, Michigan, and its stated purpose is to ensure Sharia compliant financing of the sale of private homes.
And Dearborn
And
is a hotbed for
it is. And
immigration.
so I have a lot of people that are talking to me now, a lot of people in multiple government agencies and people who know what they're talking about. I'm not going to go so far as to say that they're my informants or assets. They're just trusted contacts who I know to be intelligent, rational, professional people. And as it has been explained to me, the tactics and techniques that are currently being used are this. Let's say that I'm part of the mosque or I'm associated with the mosque and I'm trying to make sure that only Muslims who belong to this mosque are going to be able to purchase homes in this new subdivision. So what we do is we put those lots, just the lot itself up, we put it up for sale at $500,000. And that way we make sure that there's no other buyers that are going to show up and try to purchase it. So we may not be legally or technically excluding Jews, Lutherans, Hindus, Jains, or people of the Baha'i faith, but we're also making sure that it's just not for sale to anybody else. Then what we do is we have one of these a private corporation that the mosque works with in Dearborn, Michigan, or in the Dearborn, Michigan area. We have them work with a member of the mosque who wants to purchase it for them and their family, and that can be an undisclosed amount. Nobody really knows what that's going for. There's a great video. I don't recall the name, the source of it right now, but it's a great video that explains it all. It was actually filmed overseas, but it involves some guys explaining how these processes take place and how they often intentionally hire white American attorneys and white American, real estate companies to assist in the transfer, or title companies to assist in the acquisition and transfer of these properties. And that's done on purpose.
Every Jesus needs a Judas.
Yeah.
You called it a fortress-like residence constructed by EPIC's president that directly overlooks Plano Police Department's tactical vehicle lot, including bomb trucks and SWAT equipment.
Yes.
Quote, that house doesn't look like a home. It looks like an observation post, and it was built before the mosque. That's disturbing.
That's correct.
Fortress is a warfighting word. Do you think they are preparing for a battle against the police department?
I don't know exactly what they're preparing for. I can't see into their hearts and minds, but all I know is that I had a great deal of training from some of the best instructors at some of the very best schools in the world for SWAT tactics and SWAT officers. And again, I'm not bragging. That's just a fact. I've been to some just incredibly good training, and I know what I'm looking at. I'm also a pretty well accomplished competitive shooter, in addition to being a police officer and a former SWAT officer. Again, I know exactly what something looks like. More to the point, Steve, and I haven't really disclosed this. I know someone who has been inside that house, a trusted individual whose judgment I trust completely. And this individual did not get to go up onto the second story of the home, but this person was able to look at the first story, the ground level. And this person explained to me that that house on the inside does not look anything like a standard single-family home. He said there are multiple very small living spaces that are identical, and they're side by side in the first floor. And he said, "Look, Doug, I don't want to go too far." He goes, "But he said, it looks to me like it's a safe house." He goes, "It looks to me like it's a place that if I had it and I was wanting to temporarily allow a group of foreign fighters to stay in, undisclosed, at an undisclosed location, this is exactly how I would build it." Again, this is not an amateur that I'm talking about. It's a person who knows exactly what he's doing, a well-trained professional individual. And so again, whose judgment I know to be sound. And he said, "Yeah, that is not a normal single-family residence, Doug." And he reached out to me after he saw my comments.
Sounds like an eagle's nest, actually.
Yeah.
Okay, so Sharia-based finance and governance are at the core of both the existing enclave and Epic City. UIF Corporation, a Sharia-compliant finance firm operating on-site in Plano, guided by a Sharia supervisory board.
Yes.
What's Sharia finance, and where does UIF get their money? Is it Qatar? And are both Epic and Epic City both owned by Community Capital Partners? And who are the people behind CCP, the big money behind this?
Okay, so community, that's a great question, and it's multi-layered. And I would ask the listeners to just think of this in terms of an onion. Imagine that the mosque itself is at the very core of this onion. And the mosque itself is run by a nonprofit. It is a registered 501c3. 501c3 refers to the IRS code, right? It is a registered nonprofit. There's certain laws and requirements for a nonprofit to operate and exist inside the United States. But the next layer of the onion would be another legal entity. For example, an LLC that might own some of the property and or own or operate some of that property. And then you would see on top of that, yet another layer of the onion, which would be some of the businesses that are located on that property itself. So say for perhaps like a renter, the UIF Corporation, for example, has an office in a building that is on that property. And then Community Capital Partners is a separate entity. And this is the part that's great, Steve. I really, it's almost ludicrous. So after all of this broke, after all the news really hit hard, and there was some beginning to be some pretty significant public backlash, I thought this was, in some ways, it's so silly. It's an insult to our collective intelligence. So the East Plano Islamic Center released a public statement saying, hey, Community Capital Partners has nothing to do with us. And Epic Ranches is a totally separate entity that has no association with the mosque at all. That's on them. We're not doing it. That's them doing it. But Steve, when I went and found the SEC filings for Community Capital Partners, guess whose names are listed as the principals on the SEC documents? Guess what? Guess who the number one principal is? The treasurer of the East Plano Islamic Center 501c3 corporation. So to sit there and claim, it'd be like you and I start a business, you and I start a nonprofit, right? And then I go and I start a different entity and I'm trying to pull some shady stuff. And then I say, no, that's totally separate. What Steve and I have going on over here is in no way related to this shady stuff that I'm doing over here.
No, it's the old Beavis and Butthead excuse. Other kids did it. Yeah.
Yes, that's it.
And you know what it sounds like? It sounds a lot like parts of France near Paris. It's the same playbook and same players. We all saw what happened last October in Israel by their neighbors, the Gazans, and now Israel and Iran are in a fight to death. There's video of second and third graders at Epic School chanting "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," which is a call for genocide, while showing maps erasing Israel entirely. I'm convinced the education system in Gaza that teaches this hate led to October 7th.
Yes.
Why haven't the Texas school system cracked down on this?
I can't speak to that fully and completely, but what I can say is that this is a great example, Steve, of how a radical organization uses our own laws and customs and values against us. Because people do have a right to homeschool their children. People do have a right to send their own kids to religious-based schools here in the United States and in Texas. We believe in intellectual and scholastic freedom here. So people, they can do that. And so it's very difficult, though, to control that kind of curriculum. And I don't think anybody would want us to do that to most places. At the same time, though, I think that all reasonable people of just about any faith or belief, including atheists, would agree that it is highly unreasonable. It's highly suspicious for any school to be having young children, very young children, chanting about the complete eradication of a country and a people. And that is what was happening here. That's not my opinion. I've personally seen the video.
It's certainly not American. And you made the point of how they push the finger at someone else when they really are the same people. And there's this concept called taqiyya.
Yes.
It's an Arabic term meaning that believers should not take disbelievers as allies unless it's a precaution against their tyranny, defined however you want.
Yeah.
Which means outward show of friendship with disbelievers is permissible for safety while maintaining inner animosity, even deception. That's called lying. You think they're using a form of taqiyya to lie this place into existence and then it would be too late?
My personal opinion is that the evidence, the videos, the public statements, the associations, and the public statements, again, public behaviors, when taken as a whole, Steve, yes, when taken as a whole, there is plenty of reason to believe that there are numerous layers of deceptive behavior going on there. I don't think
we would call that motive in the crime-fighting world.
Yeah. Well, again, how do we judge whether or not somebody is or is not reasonable? How do we look at how do we decide if our neighbor who's just moved in next door is a good and decent person.
Well, if they didn't think it was wrong, they wouldn't be trying to hide it. So obviously that's a problem. But you are getting attention, and it's all
Mm.
really thanks to you and Amy. Governor Greg Abbott ordered the Texas Rangers to launch a criminal investigation into
Yeah.
Epic City and its affiliated entities. Attorney General Ken Paxton initiated investigations into potential violations of consumer protection and housing laws, including issuing a civil investigative demand and requesting records from multiple Texas cities. The Texas State Securities Board began examining community capital partners, probably because
Yes.
you told them about them, for potential fundraising and securities law violations. Sounds like a lot of that. That's dedicating a lot of resources that could have been avoided if dealt with sooner in response to Epic's development. Basically doubling down. They hired top criminal defense attorney Dan Cogdell, best known
Yes.
for defending Attorney General Paxton, which is weird, and brought in Allen Media to run public relations. Always a bad sign when you have a crisis media come in. Are those things having success? Stopping it?
Uh, I think there, yes and no. Yes and no. I know for a fact that there are some very, very skilled and professional investigators that work for the governor's office as well as at the AG's office. I know a few of them personally. Don't know all of them, but they're very skilled, and I have no doubt that those teams of investigators will eventually get to the bottom of it. And if there's anything that's actionable that can occur, that it will occur. However, at the same time, I want to remind your viewers that uh, these organizations are, in fact, using our own values and laws and our Constitution against us. They are.
Mhm.
That is irrefutable. No reasonable person can look at the facts about what is going on and say that is not occurring. And I will give them their due. They have hired a very, very capable attorney. He's charming, has a great Texas accent, but at the end of the day, he is a very calculating and very, very precise and very intelligent attorney. He's very good at what he does. Also, the PR firm that they hired, that is no joke. That is not some Bush League PR firm. That is a highly successful PR firm that has dealt with some of the more contentious issues that we've seen historically in the Dallas area for the last 20 years. They are heavy hitters. And at the end of the day, I do believe that they will be very successful at muddying the waters. There will be reasonable people who are on the fence. There will also be decent American citizens who really don't keep track of this kind of stuff, that probably don't watch this podcast or others like it, probably
What?
don't read Amy Meck's work,
They
who
better.
will see some of the counter statements that have been made and some of the public displays that have been done by this firm and by the attorneys and say, and shrug their shoulders and like, hey, what are you going to do? And then just move on to the next thing.
Well, they couldn't do any of it without compliance at the top. And so there's a newly surfaced video that reveals Plano Mayor John B. Munns and Collin County Commissioner Duncan Webb, who you spoke in front of, offering the East Plano Islamic Center special access to public school officials, exposing once again how this mosque has transformed from a religious institution into a powerful political force shaping education, demographics, and public policy in Texas. Fair to say they're likely greasing some palms. And what's Mayor Munns thinking? Is he Muslim?
I don't know about that. I don't know much about Mayor Munns. I didn't have. He came into office shortly after I left the city of Plano. I will say that from a government craft perspective, and from a professional governance perspective, it is my personal, and I might even go so far as to say my professional opinion, that Mayor Munns is not a sophisticated actor. I think that what he did was horribly ill-advised. I think that he was attempting, on his best day, I think that perhaps he was attempting to perform some kind of outreach, and again, perhaps some kind of demonstration of the city of Plano's tolerance and acceptance for all faiths and all people. And I think that it has rightfully backfired on him. I think that
It
what he
reminds me
did
of the
was
mayor in Red Dawn, actually, to be honest with you.
that is Steve, I had not thought of that, but now, dude, now that you say that, that I'm going to go find that clip because that is exactly right.
Exactly.
He is
Especially when he's
he
standing there while all of his citizens are getting gunned down.
yeah, he reminds me of the mayor in Red Dawn. That's a great way to put it, Steve.
A recent Epic hosted fundraiser for QCA, Kualam Collegiate Academy, QCA, a
Yeah.
Sharia-based private school. Young children were showcased in their classrooms in Sharia-adherent clothing, including required hijabs for girls of certain
Yes.
ages and full Palestinian nationalist attire, showcasing a radical, politically charged educational model. And they say they're not actually doing that.
Yeah, this is a great, Steve. I'm really glad you brought that up. And this is the part I want listeners to understand. That academy, the QCA, I apologize, I don't have the word here in front of me. I don't want to mispronounce it. That's not happening off-site. That is happening on the actual property of the East Plano Islamic Center, right there in East Plano, in the city of Plano, Texas. And you are spot on about what they're doing and what they're teaching. Again, that's not based on my opinion. That's based on their videos, based on their own public persona and their own public presentations. And imagine this, if that's what they're willing to show on their public YouTube page, what is it that they're not showing us? And on that note, before I forget, Steve, since I made my public statement and wrote that public Facebook post, there have been a couple of those links that have been taken down. They also the Junaid Din with the Yaqeen Institute. You can still find his information, but that link that I provided, it now just takes you straight to the base website. But some of those videos of the children engaged in admittedly very disturbing actions and behaviors in schools, that has since been taken off of their YouTube page. It was on there before this all hit the news, and now it's been removed.
Yeah.
Why? If
Again,
you
if
weren't
they
doing
thought they were
anything,
doing everything fine, they wouldn't be
yeah,
hiding stuff. So
why would you take that down?
I got just a little time left with you. Obviously, this is not a fight over zoning. It's a battle over whether religious law can override state law and whether
Right.
Texans are going to allow this. It's about ideology, community structuring, and parallel legal systems, totally un-American. And unless state and federal authorities act decisively, this will be the Texas model that will spread everywhere. We're talking about 400 acres. El Paso is wealthy. This is a very expensive enterprise. Have you or Amy followed the money and found anything from Middle East like Iran or Qatar, our enemies? And what effort was this to free a convicted terrorist in New York? They have a mayoral candidate in New York today that is a pro anti-Indian, similar to Pakistan,
Mhm.
that Texas just honored with that holiday. What's the connection to terrorism?
Yeah, I haven't traced down some of the names because I don't want to go too far with it because just like in English, just because two people are named Smith or two people are named Jones, doesn't mean that there's a direct familial connection. But the one of the terrorists that they've supported is Afia Siddiqui. She is again a highly educated woman. She wanted to build by her own handwritten notes. She's a scientist. Wanted to build a dirty bomb to detonate in New York City. She did shoot at American soldiers. She was absolutely, without a doubt, aligned with Al Qaeda, associated with Al Qaeda, and she was convicted by a jury in federal court and sentenced to 86 years. She's currently serving an 86-year sentence at the federal prison in Fort Worth, Texas. And the East Plano Islamic Center, who one of their principals is also the last name of Siddiqui. I don't know if there's a direct connection there, a family connection. However, the East Plano Islamic Center, in conjunction with the Council on American Islamic Relations, CARE, have repeatedly worked together to hold fundraisers advocating for her release. Now, to put that in perspective for the average everyday American, I would ask any of your listeners or anyone who's on the fence about the East Plano Islamic Center, if you had a so-called Christian organization right next door to you that was holding fundraisers to try to get Terry Nichols, one of the Oklahoma City bombers, released from federal prison, would you find that to be a reasonable behavior of any religious group? Would you? Because that's sort of the equivalent of what we're dealing with here.
Okay. Has Abbott Cornyn, Cruz, the two senators from Texas, and the Texas Congress delegation been particularly accommodating to their demands for what amounts to religious First Amendment freedom exemptions in there, or is there some kind of corruption going on, a sellout?
Yeah, I can't speak to anything like that. I haven't seen anything like that. To be very frank, Steve, I believe that what's happened here is that there was a whole bunch of people who were asleep at the switch, for lack of a better term. I believe that Senators Cruz and Cornyn, like many U.S. senators, are working under the belief that a fully developed city like Plano, Texas, is supposed to be managed by professionals who are supposed to be acting like adults, who manage things and also look at behaviors that are perhaps disturbing or irrational, or which should be looked into instead of just allowed to fester and grow. I think that a lot of people, I suspect that both senators and our governor and probably our attorney general were probably pretty surprised to find out that leadership at the city of Plano not only failed to take any action while this was all growing in Plano, but actively supported it. And in many ways endorsed some of these leaders here in the East Plano Islamic Center in what I believe was an effort, again, to show how tolerant and welcoming the city of Plano is to people of all faiths.
Yeah,
It's all
you
part
can't
of
say it
that.
because you live there, but I'll say it. There's a lot of money floating around, and it's got to be going into somebody's pockets at some point. So, but
Yeah,
in closing, they've also refused to account for sermons that slander Christianity or for
yes.
policies that impose Sharia-based restrictions on property ownership, education, dress, and gender roles. The thing is, why not stay home? If they want to live like that, in their intention is not to invade us with their doctrine, is it unreasonable to expect them to live carved off from our laws and governments back home with their governments and their religion? And a lot of these pictures I see, especially at Amy's website, are young men with their families, 18 to 24. We call that military age. That can they can get a provided U.S. citizenship pathway if they enlist in the government, in the military, go fight Iran, let's say, if it comes to that, to earn naturalization under Section 328 of the Immigration and Naturalization Act and prove their loyalty. Are they trying to do similar to the Orthodox Jews in Jerusalem who refuse to fight, even though their sons and daughters of their friends have to go fight those wars? Are they basically saying like, well, no, we're not going to follow the normal path to naturalization. We want to do this as a little carved out Mecca.
My suspicion, based on what I've seen thus far, and of course there could be additional information, Steve. What I believe has occurred here is that we have a large group of people who simply do not share the same values, practices, mores that the vast majority of Americans do, including Americans of many different faiths.
So they have shown signs of refusing to assimilate.
Oh, there is no doubt about that, Steve. There are abundant signs that this is not assimilation. It is a parallel society, a parallel organization, which again, by their own words, has rejected many of the core tenets of being a loyal American.
Including the normal
That's
pathways to citizenship, like most Mexicans will do.
Well, the other issue, though, on that note, Steve, the other issue that we have here is that a very, very large percentage of the people who are attending the mosque right there in East Plano are American citizens. I mean, the leader himself. I mean, he was born in Houston, Texas. I mean, he's so on paper, he's a Texan. He's a U.S. citizen. He cannot be deported. And I've had to explain this to some other organizations that have reached out to me, and I'll say it here. Regardless of how wild you want to get with this, there is no situation in which the mosque is going to be bulldozed or that all those people are going to be deported, because the majority of them, I believe the numbers are somewhere around 80 something percent. The majority of the people attending that mosque are American citizens. So you mentioned, the Battle of Tours and Charles Martel. I'm not being hyperbolic, Steve, when I say I'm worried about the future of my grandchildren who haven't even been born yet. Because if we don't address this head on and confront these kind of attitudes and the public statements and the public behaviors that are occurring literally in our own backyard, our grandchildren or great grandchildren may be forced to make a decision like what Charles Martel did.
You just plainly spelled it out. It's the enemy within, absolutely. If they act out
Yeah,
and
if
be violent. Well, Doug, thank you for your time. We are at the end here. I wish I could do. I have to have you back actually. So please tell our listeners where they can find out more about you and your social media.
You can find me at my website, which is rdrtexas.com. Again, I'm not really an activist on this issue. This is not what I do as a full-time job. That's something completely different. But you can find me at rdrtexas.com. I'm also on Instagram. I don't have a huge social media, presence because, frankly, I don't need one. Attorneys call me several times a week asking me to work for them on various cases. So it's I decided I didn't really need to do that. Steve, the one thing I want to end with
at Deaton 1475, right?
that's yes, sir. It is
Yep.
correct.
And what's 1475?
Yes, sir. 1475 was my badge number when I was at Plano PD.
Okay. So what do you want to say to close up?
The last thing I want to say to anybody who is doubting this or maybe has question marks, anyone who thinks that all religious faiths are the same, or that, hey, they're a great organization. They help the homeless and they do this and they do that for the community. This is what I want people to understand. Dangerous extremism doesn't always knock on the door with a gun in its hand. Sometimes it builds a church, opens a school, helps the homeless, and it smiles at you while claiming to be your helpful and tolerant neighbor.
That's very well said. All right. Well, thanks again for coming on with us. Hang on, folks. I will be right back.
Sing a song about the heartland, the only place I feel at home. Sing about the way a good man works until the daylight's gone.
Hey, thanks for coming back. It's that time to remind everyone to please subscribe to heartlandjournal.com. Notice how I always say please. That's how we grow and keep this content free for you, please. Now, the Heartland Journal news. Since public schools don't teach this lesson, I feel it my duty to, especially when listening to the people in this weekend's No Kings rally and reading their signs, professionally printed ones, of course. The 1917 Russian Revolution was a pivotal event that dismantled the Tsarist autocracy and led to the establishment of a socialist state. It unfolded in two main phases, the February Revolution and the October Revolution. February Revolution, March 1917, causes were widespread discontent, fueled the uprising. World War I brought massive casualties, food shortages, and economic collapse. Tsar Nicholas II's autocratic rule, coupled with political repression and social inequality, alienated the masses, including workers, peasants, and soldiers. There were strikes and protests erupted in Petrograd, which is now St. Petersburg on a map. Workers joined by women demanding bread clashed with police. Mutinying soldiers sided with the protesters, forcing Nicholas II to abdicate on March 2nd, which is really March 15th in the Gregorian calendar, but oh well. The outcome was a provisional government led by liberal and moderate socialist figures was formed to govern until a constituent assembly could establish a new system. Meanwhile, the Petrograd Soviet, a council of workers and soldiers, emerged as a rival power advocating socialist policies. October Revolution, October 1917. The provisional government struggled, continuing the unpopular war and delaying land reforms. This eroded its support, while the Bolsheviks, led by Vladimir Lenin, gained influence in the Soviets, promising peace, land, and bread. On October 25th, the Bolsheviks, backed by the Red Guards and sympathetic soldiers, launched a coordinated coup. They seized key Petrograd sites, including the Winter Palace, with minimal resistance. The All-Russian Congress of Soviets, dominated by Bolsheviks and allies, endorsed the takeover. The Bolsheviks established a socialist government, the Council of People's Commissars, led by Lenin. This marked the start of Soviet rule, though it sparked a civil war, 1918 to 1922, against anti-Bolshevik forces. The Mensheviks, favoring gradual reform, lost influence to the Bolsheviks, who capitalized on radical sentiment and decisive action. The revolution was driven by urban workers, soldiers, and peasants, but the Bolsheviks' disciplined organization and propaganda secured their dominance. It ended centuries of monarchical rule, introducing Marxist-Leninist governance, which reshaped global politics. The revolution inspired communist movements worldwide, altered Russia's trajectory, and led to the Soviet Union's formation in 1922. It also intensified class struggles and geopolitical tensions, influencing 20th century history profoundly. The Mensheviks and Bolsheviks were factions of the Russian Social Democratic Labor Party, RSDLP, diverging in 1903 over strategies and organization. Julius Martov's Mensheviks sought a broad, inclusive party, advancing gradual socialist reforms through democratic means and alliances, like Bill Clinton. Vladimir Lenin's Bolsheviks, spoiler alert, they won. You'll see how in a second. Bolsheviks demanded a disciplined, elite, revolutionary vanguard to spearhead a proletarian uprising emphasizing rapid, radical change. Their rift deepened, and in 1917, Lenin's Bolsheviks, using violent tactics during the Russian Revolution, outmaneuvered Martov's Mensheviks, who rejected such aggression, securing power. In 2025, the U.S. Democratic Party reflects a similar split. A moderate wing, like the Mensheviks, pursued incremental reforms, prioritizing coalition building and institutional progress from Carter to Clinton. A radical faction, echoing Bolsheviks, pushed for sweeping, systematic change, often through confrontational rhetoric and bold policy demands, from Obama to Biden. Now, physically violent and radicals' aggressive activism and public pressure mirror Lenin's decisive tactics, gaining traction in a polarized climate. Like Lenin's triumph over Martov, the radical Democrats overshadow moderates, leveling crises to amplify their influence. This parallel underscores the tension between the pragmatic reform and radical upheaval, with the latter prevailing when urgency or division favors audacity. Obama's book, The Audacity of Hope. Thank God we have a two-party system and the Republicans haven't signed on to that officially yet. And who would vote for that? We'll find out in about 12 months when primaries begin. That is it for this episode. Thank you, Jason Weekly, for trying to teach these Dixiecrats and rhinos, yes, there are some here in Tennessee, what it means to be a Florida, or one day maybe we'll call it DeSantis Republican. Good luck turning Nashville red. You're going to need it, but maybe less so today than years past. The numbers suggest so. This is goodbye for now. I'm your host, Steve Abramowitz, editor-in-chief of HeartlandJournal.com. See y'all next time. Peace in our time, and definitely glory to God.
My name is Douglas Deaton, and I'm a resident of Collin County. I retired from the Plano Police Department after 26 years of full-time law enforcement service. And I dealt with representatives of EPIC many times when I was the sergeant for the Plano Police Department, the training sergeant for the Plano PD. There seems to be a general misunderstanding that we're talking about a plan to build an Islamic Sharia-friendly community. The EPIC neighborhood already exists in Plano. It's been there for nearly 12 years, with 74 residential properties, a massive mosque, schools, a medical clinic, and multiple businesses. It also has an office of an Islamic financing institution called the UIF Corporation. The UIF Corporation is not a bank. It's a Michigan-based corporation whose publicly stated purpose is to, quote, engage in financial transactions that are Sharia compliant, end quote. Those are their words, not mine. The local government officials south of here have known for years that only Muslims can purchase homes inside that neighborhood. You have to be a member of their mosque to live there. The first house built in that neighborhood was built right next to the Plano Police Academy. It's a huge structure with two separate front doors. The rear of the property is just a few feet from a large outdoor warning siren. The house has a large second-story platform overlooking the restricted access parking lot where the police department stored specialized vehicles such as bomb trucks, bomb disposal equipment, and the SWAT team's armored vehicle. I am a court-recognized expert in SWAT team tactics and procedures. That house has all the hallmarks of a fortress and a command post. The rear of the house looks a lot like an observation post and a shooting platform. Why would somebody choose to build a house so close to a giant warning siren and a police training site? Why would someone build a huge platform overlooking all those specialized police emergency vehicles? The first owner of that house is a leader
in the Epic neighborhood. And he is also the co-founder of the Yaqeen Institute for Islamic Research. And I urge everyone to visit their website and read what it has to say about instituting Sharia law. This is not a matter of radicals hiding in plain sight. They're not hiding. They've been open about their beliefs and their intent. Local government decision makers have failed to ask hard questions for fear of negative publicity and being labeled as bigots. I'm not here to spread innuendo or to make unfounded accusations. I'm asking everyone to simply look at the evidence and the confirmed facts that are already in existence. Thank you for your time, Judge.
Thank you, Mr. Deaton.
Yeah, I've been dreaming of the wild, wild plains, walking where the pine trees dance.
Heartland Journal Podcast is the media property of heartlandjournal.com, where you can find news stories, commentary, and content serving the heartland of America. Any views or opinions represented on the podcast are personal and belong solely to the creator and do not represent those of the people, institutions, or organizations that the creator may or may not be associated with in professional or personal capacity unless explicitly stated.